So I say we go ahead and jump in. Can you all, everybody hear me okay? Everybody give me a thumbs up if you can see.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sue. Much appreciated. Thank you, John. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, same as last time. And you guys let me know if you're seeing my SketchUp page. Is that there for everybody?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to go back to home here. So we're going to start from the kind of from the get-go. So we covered a lot the last time we met, but it was mostly introductory and getting you sort of comfortable with the program itself. So I thought today we sort of jump right in to the deep end of the pool. And I thought maybe I'd focus on a very quick and very simple project that we can all do on our own time. And it would give us a best chance to sort of see a robust amount of tools. And I can kind of go through things pretty quickly, but you should get a real sense as to how to use SketchUp in more advanced ways. So without further ado, let me just jump in here. If you remember correctly, this is our splash page. You will probably not have anything here simply because I have a file that I built this morning. So I'm going to just double click on that file and it should open straight up. And this is what I want us to work on today. Now, it may look, I'm going to actually remove that. It may look very advanced, but I assure you, this is actually a pretty easy thing to make. I built this in about an hour this morning, and it really is not that complicated once you know your way around SketchUp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through basically making your bedroom or making a room in your house. I assume pretty much everybody has a bedroom or a living room or home. So I figured we'd just start with something that we all are pretty familiar with, which is what SketchUp was originally invented for anyway, which was basically interior design or architecture. So how do we get here? How do we get to this point in such a short amount of time? So I'm going to walk us through what we really first need to do is we need to basically figure out what this space is and how to make the space. And then we can put things like furniture and windows and stuff into the space. But we got to start with the basic structure. So if we were to take a bird's eye look straight down on this room, we have obviously a ceiling on here. If I was to remove the ceiling, we now see that same room with the furniture sitting in it, the hardwood floor, the walls, and this is all the furniture, the bed, the beanbag, the bookcase, the dresser, so forth and so forth. If we remove the furniture, and while we're at it, we might as well go ahead and remove the floor. This is where we want to start. We want to get to this point. We want to basically outline our well, in this case, I think it's 12 walls, but basically the shape of a room. Now, if you wanted to do this, you could just invent a room if you want. I decided to use a very real room, which is my daughter's room, which is just about 10 feet away from me right now. So how did I get here, right? Let's start with that. How do we get this built? And then we can move from there. So the first thing I did this morning is I went into my daughter's room and very old school, I took out a tape measure and I basically measured her room. I skipped things like windows, I skipped closets, I skipped doors. We can add those later. We basically just want the space, right? The interior space. I skipped trim. I went from wall to wall or drywall to drywall, inside dimensions. And I basically measured what I thought were all the important aspects to get us started. So what we want to do is we basically want to start with this. We want to translate this into SketchUp. Now, typically, I'd have this drawing sitting next to me. I wouldn't have it in SketchUp. There's no need for me to draw it into SketchUp. It's not to scale, so I can't outline it or I can't scan it. So, but I left it in SketchUp and I actually brought it into SketchUp so we could do this side by side, just so you guys can see. But typically you'd have that piece of paper just sitting next to you. If you remember last week, I said it's always best to start a drawing at the origin. And if you remember correctly, the origin is where the three axes, the X, Y, and Z axes, all converge together. It just gives you a very clean and a very safe place to start your drawing. Because if I was to start here, we don't really know where this is, right? Now, unfortunately, because of the way I've set up my program today, my axis is way over here, right? So, you know, here's my red, here's my green, and here's my blue. Red is, again, west, east, north, south, and up and down, right? But I don't want to start my drawing here. I want to start it back where my drawing is. But what you will notice is, see the red axis, the east-west axis, is still there. If I'm going to zoom out, just to show you how I built this all up today, here's the red, which is positive, the green, which is positive, the dotted line is negative, and the dotted line is negative. So east, west, north, south. You can see that red line extends essentially infinitely. We can keep zooming out, and it just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes. So as long as you can see one of the axes in your drawing, I'm going to zoom back in here, you know we have an axis point we can actually build off of, which is nice. It gives us at least some semblance of home, right? So what I want to do is I want to create some quick guidelines in here just to give me a starting place. What is a guideline? A guideline is basically a position that will become almost like a temporary or a stand-in origin, right? And I want to build my grids off of the origin that we know already exists. So how I'm going to do that? First thing I'm going to do is, remember, all of our toolbars are here. These are all of our drawing necessities, things that we use to actually build our drawing. If you scroll down and you see this one that looks like a tape measure, it actually is going to say tape measure, okay? If I click on that, it expands and shows me all the different tools that are under basically this tape or measuring tool set. I'm going to select the top one, which is the tape measure. And clever enough, it'll look like a yellow tape measure. Now, I don't know how Stanley owns the rights to tape measures and it becomes yellow, but that's probably the most universal we understand. Now, if I move this around, I'm just moving my mouse around, you can see it's not locating anything here, right? It's just basically floating in space. But the minute I just come down, I'm going to come down slowly. I'm not clicking anything. The minute it touches and it tells me, look, I'm on the red axis, and a little red square shows up, I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to just pull straight up. And if it pulls up in one of the three colors, the blue, the red, or the green, you know it's pulling in the direction of an axis, and it basically is on our flat plane, on one of the planes that we want to be on. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this up. I'm not clicking on anything. I just did the one click to get it here. I'm going to pull up the mouse, stay in that green axis, and then I'm going to click where I want to start my first guide, which is basically in line with the wall, okay? But I want to give a guide for this too. So here's the neat thing. Because I placed this image basically on the origin, if I touch this, I also get an edge, and this is the edge of the image. If I click on that and pull forward, you'll notice now I'm on that red axis. So if I was to click anywhere on here, I now have two guides, okay? I have a place I can start, an intersection, and I can play off of this, and I know that everything I draw from this point forward, as long as I maintain this as my origin, will be level, will be plumb, and will be flat, okay? So that's how you build some guidelines. Now I can build as many guidelines as I want. I can put them all over the place, and we'll show that in a little bit, but I just need two to get me started, right? So let me go back to this image. So all we want to do first is translate these lines. That's all we want to do, real simple, just lines. So how do I do that? Now, if we scroll down here, I'm sorry, my mouse is a little sensitive today, or maybe it's my fingers, I'm not sure. We come down here, we have the selection tool, the eraser tool, the bucket tool, and what is the line tool? Again, if you click on the line tool, you get two choices. You get a straight line tool, and you get a freehand tool, okay? Freehand basically means you can draw like you would if you were essentially script writing or freehanding. But we want to use a straight line tool because we know, or we assume, everything in this house is essentially, everything in this room is basically a straight line. So I'm going to select the straight line tool, and you'll notice a red pencil shows up. Same thing, if I'm moving out in space, it's not clicking, there's nothing for it to be located to. It's just basically floating in space. But if I come over, and again, I'm not clicking anything, I'm just moving my mouse. If I touch one of the guidelines, you'll notice it snaps to it and it gives me places I can draw. And if I go to the intersection, boom, I get a nice little X, which is the intersection. And I think this would be a great place to do this corner, right? So I'm going to start by going across this way, and I want to draw this wall, okay? So I'm going to basically go to that intersection. I'm going to click my mouse once, and you'll notice if you look down here, you'll see that I'm getting these lengths again. This is going to tell me the length of the line that I'm drawing, okay? So if I'm at 0, it's at 0. I'm not clicking anything now. I've clicked the one time. I'm just going to now pull my pencil in the direction of that axis. Now, because we have snapping, because this is a snapping program, what I mean by snapping is you essentially, your pencil wants to basically like snap to certain origins and certain points. So it would take me a lot. You know, you can see I have to move my mouse a good ways off that line before I get away from the snap. If I come down, I get to about there and it snaps, okay? Which is good. We want to be on this red axis. So I'm going to move along. Now I could move this all the way until I see 125.5, but that's really tedious. So I'm actually going to stop way short. I'm just going to click right here. And I've got 68 and 1/16 of an inch, but I want 125.5 inch. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to override that length box by just typing in the dimension I want, which is 125.5, and I'm going to hit enter. And there we go. We now have this line at 125.5, which is exactly this. Now I want to do this one. We're just going to go around this room systematically. So again, my pencil's free. It's floating all over the place. If I move along, it should locate that endpoint. Pop, there you go. It's going to even tell me that's an endpoint. That's where we want to begin. Okay, and I'm going to basically click once on that endpoint, and I'm going to drag down. Now again, even though there's no guideline there, it wants to move in the most common axis. So if I'm moving down, it's going to take me quite a bit to get off of that green axis. See how it snaps to it? Well, we want to be on that green axis because we want this to be a perfect 90-degree. So I've clicked once. I'm going to drag down. I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to stop way short. Okay, I'm going to just click right here, and I'm going to put in my dimension, which I'm looking at. It's 1/16 and 13/16, which is 8.8125. Oop, and I totally did that wrong. There we go. And I'm going to hit enter. So now we have that wall. Okay, and I'm just going to follow this all the way around. Now there's a little trick here. I'm using the escape button to release my pencil off of that line. But if you don't do that, if I just click, I'm going to click one time here. Okay, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to go this way now again on the red axis, and I stop early. I type in 31 because that's my dimension, hit enter, and you'll notice the little green dot shows up. Now, if I move my pencil right now without hitting escape, it now starts to draw immediately the next line. Understand? If you want to escape from that line, I just hit the escape button, and now I'm free to move, okay? But we're going to not use the escape button. We're just going to go ahead and draw all the way around. So I'm going to hit the end point again. You know, I'm moving along, end point, click the mouse, and I'm going to move down on the green, and I want to do 38 and 7/16. So I'm going to go 38.4375 and hit enter. And there we go. Okay. Now it's still attached. I haven't hit escape. So now we can do the next one. So I'm going to come up short and do 94.5, hit enter. And then I'm going to see it's still connected. Okay. I'm going to come up and I'm going to stop short. And I believe that is 31 3/8. Still connected. I actually disconnected there. I'm not sure why. Maybe because I moved the image. But again, if it disconnects, that's fine. You can always find that endpoint. There you go. See, it snaps right to it. Click on it. That looks like it's 12 1/8. And then this looks like it is 66 5/8. And then this looks like it's 12 and an eighth back. And then it looks like 57 and a quarter. Now, I don't need to type this one in. This should, if we've done this right, as I come up, it's going to want to naturally hit that corner point. And if I've done my math right, look at the length, 57 and a quarter, and look at the room, 57 and a quarter. I'm going to click there. Now, if you guys might remember from last week, the minute I click here, what's going to happen? We're actually going to complete an airtight or watertight shape, and the whole shape is going to turn gray because we've now completed the full perimeter. As soon as I click here, boom, now we have this gray shape. Okay, so that's a great place to start, right? We basically got our room mapped out. Now, if we wanted to check any of these dimensions, we can go back to our tape measure tool, okay, back up to this one here, and we can click on any spot we want. I'm going to click there. I'm going to move it across. It's going to snap over here, and it'll give you a dimension down in the length dimension box, 125 and a half, which is what we wanted. And you can do that anywhere if you want to double check. Okay. But basically we have what we need here. Now, this isn't enough yet for us to actually start building the walls up. All this is a shape. Okay. But we actually want the walls to be the shape, not the room to be the shape. Do you understand what I mean? If I orbit around here and look at this on its plane, there's no walls there. It's just the floor, essentially, right? So let me go back here. But what we ideally want to do is we want to create the walls. Now we know this is the inside of the room. It's the inside dimensions. We want to put walls around the outside, right? We want to build around this. Now here's a little hint for anybody who is building a home. Typically speaking, interior walls are about 4 inches wide, and exterior walls are between 4.5 and 5 inches wide. That just gives you a very rough estimate. It isn't critical in this instance, but I'm just going to say 4 inches. I want a 4-inch wall all the way around this room. Now, how would you do that? There's a number of ways of doing it, right? There's the more tedious way of doing it, which I'm going to show you real quickly, which is basically using the pencil tool again. But where do we start? How do we know where 4 inches is off of here, right? How do we figure that out? So the one way to do that is, again, use our wonderful tape measure tool. Tape measure tool is great because we know it not only measures, but it also creates guides, right? So if we created a guide here and a guide here, we want an accurate guide off of this line that is 4 inches up. Okay, it's very simple to do. I'm just going to hover, it's going to click, it's going to snap to that line. I'm going to click, and I'm going to move up in the green. And yes, 7 inches is way wide of a wall. That is way too wide. So I'm just going to override that by typing 4, hitting enter. And now we have 4 inches off of that. Okay. And we can do that all the way around, right? I could click here and go out 4 inches. I could click here and go out 4 inches. Okay, I'm going to hit 4, click here and go out 4 inches, and so forth, right? We could do that all the way around. And then all we need to do is we grab the pencil and we go to our intersection point and we just start dragging to intersections. You see intersection? And we just start basically drawing around this room. That's one way of doing it. But in this case, it isn't a huge issue because it's a relatively simple room. But if you had a really complex room with lots of intersections and lots of spaces, that can get really tiresome. Or if you're doing a whole house, for example, you don't really want to go that route. There's an easier route. And something we would, I'm going to just delete what we did here. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could basically take this shape and just basically outline it or offset it by 4 inches? That'd be wonderful, right? Well, amazingly enough, there is that tool in SketchUp, but it's called the offset tool, which is pretty appropriately named. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So again, these are all of our tools. What I'm going to select, remember our really awesome push-pull tool. This is the sort of the cornerstone of SketchUp. It's the tool that allows us to pull and expand, extrude shapes. But if you click on that, you'll notice there's a whole bunch of different types of editing tools, right? There's the push-pull tool. This is called the follow me tool. And then this is called the ta-da, offset tool. Okay, so I'm going to click the offset tool, and you'll notice it's actually pretty clever. It looks like a little protractor with a little red protractor on the inside. It's basically saying you can take one shape and you can offset that shape by any degree of space that you want. So right now, again, it's not doing anything, right? It's just floating in space. But the minute I'm not clicking anything, the minute I just move it with my mouse over a shape, you notice the shape gets all of those diamond patterns in it. That means this is now selected. This is now a space that could be offset. It's saying, yes, you can do this if you want. If you click on something that can't be offset, like a line or a space that isn't complete, a non-water type space, it won't select. But because this is a water type space and it can be selected. So I'm going to go across and I'm going to select it. I'm just going to click my mouse once. Okay. Once I click it once, now I can move this and you'll see it's offsetting that shape. But I don't want to be on the inside. I want to be on the outside. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to go past my perimeter and go this way. And how far do we want to go past? We want to go past 4 inches. We want this offset of 4 inches. So again, I'm going to go way long. I'm going to go 18 inches and I'm going to override that by hitting 4, typing it in, hitting enter, and boom, there we go. We now have 2 separate entities. We have the inside space and we have this outside space. Okay. To make things a little bit more easy to understand, I'm going to eliminate this space. We don't really need it right now. I'm just going to delete it. Okay. Now these are our walls. Now if I orbit around this thing, we now see that we now have walls. Now, all we have to do at this point is essentially grab our push-pull tool. So I'm going to go back to where that was. We just used the offset tool. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to go back to our amazing push-pull tool. Okay. Basically, same thing. I'm just floating around. The minute I go on something that can be extruded, it lights up with that same pattern. I'm going to click once and I'm going to pull up. And if you notice, I can just move this up as far as I want. And I could say, look, I know my roof is my ceiling is 96 inches. I could stop short. I could type in 98, hit enter, and there is essentially my room, right? Which is not that different to what we're looking at over here. But there is one major difference, okay? And the major difference is basically an organization thing that I really like to talk about, which is, we mentioned this a little bit last week, and it was called components versus just straight up models. Right now, everything in this is all connected. If we wanted to basically open up a wall so we could see into this space, right? If I double click on this, it clicks on the whole thing, right? I could try to eliminate individual pieces, but really, if I want to look in this space or show this space to clients, or I want to do whatever to this, it'd be really nice if I could eliminate certain walls without affecting the model, right? I can't do that right now. If I double click on all this and hit delete, it deletes the whole thing, right? I can't hide. If I click on all of this and hit hide, it hides the whole thing, right? It's all one entity. So that's a bit of a problem. How could I do this? So I'm going to go back to the view that we were just on. I'm going to hide that. And I'm going to move this over a little bit. So first off, let's try and break this up into more manageable pieces. I think for simplicity's sake, I think we should have this be one wall. I think this should be one wall. This should be another wall. And then this should be another wall. So basically we have a north wall, an east wall, a west wall, and a south wall. Okay, so how do we do that? How do we basically break this up? So let's start real simple. We want to basically draw a line here and a line here and make this one separate space. How do we draw a line to break this space up? Because right now, if I click on this, it's all one space. Okay, I'm going to go back to my line tool. I'm going to select my line tool. I'm going to bring it across. Now, I don't really know where to start here, right? The guide helps me, but if there wasn't a guide there, I wouldn't really know where to start. So I'm going to start on the inside corner because there's an intersection and an endpoint that we know is exactly where we want to be. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here so you guys can see. I'm going to hit that endpoint. I'm going to click and I'm going to drag it on the red axis out into the snaps to that outside, and I'm gonna click, okay? Now, curious enough, if I click on this whole thing again, it's still gonna select everything because I haven't completed this as a shape yet. Why is it not a shape yet? Because this is still open. So I gotta close that as well. So I'm gonna do the exact same thing. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit, grab my pencil tool, go to my little intersection here. I'm just using my mouse and snapping to it. I'm gonna go across the 4 inches. It's gonna snap to that edge. Now look what happens when I select this. That now selects individually to the rest of this, okay? So I'm gonna do the same thing down here. We wanna do the exact same thing. We wanna break this up into a separate entity. So pencil, pencil, come on down, snap, get to my endpoint, click, drag, snap. Same over here, click, drag, snap. And then I click it off. And now look, now we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Well, I'll see if I can get this, my 4 different walls, which is what we wanted, okay? But that's still not enough. That's still not enough. We've now broken this up into separate walls, but remember, this is all still connected. Just because this is a separate space, the perimeters are still connected. If I was to triple click on this, it still will select the whole thing. So we still got to go a little step further. And this is where components comes in. If you remember correctly, a component is basically creating an individual part that can be edited, but in its normal state as a component, it is detached, it is its own thing, and it cannot be interfered with or modified unless you purposely modify it. You can't accidentally modify it. So ideally, we want this to be a component, we want this to be a component, we want this to be a component, and we want this to be a component, thus 4 components making up the wall. So how do we do that? So as I said, you click once, it just selects the space. You click twice, it selects the space and the perimeter. You click 3 times, it selects the entire model. So we just want to select this one wall, the space and the walls. So I'm going to double click and look, it highlights the whole thing. While that's highlighted, I'm going to hover over this. I'm going to right click on my mouse and I'm going to simply say make component. We want to make this a component. So I'm going to make it a component. And why don't we call this north wall? Okay. And I'm not going to worry about any of these things. You guys can play with that later. It's not necessary right now. I always just say glued to none is the default. I don't worry about this. But north wall is named, and I'm going to hit OK. Now, see, right now that is, I can, if I just select it, it just shows up as a whole thing. If I click on that, it doesn't select that anymore. So we want to do this all the way around, right? So let me take this one, okay? I'm going to double click on it. I'm going to right click. I'm going to say make component, and I'm going to call that east wall and hit OK. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to double click on that. I'm going to do the same thing, make component. Let's call that south. You'll notice that I'm using underscore. You guys are probably in some way, some of you may not be in my generation, maybe younger than my generation, but when I first started using computers, I was always a Mac person, and Mac and PC did not play. You think they don't play well together now. They didn't play well together at all back in the day. And if you had any spaces in your file structure, it would just cause disaster. Nothing could open them. So we always used underscore as spaces, so there were no spaces in your file structure. I still adhere to that. It's just who I am. So make component, and we're gonna call this west wall, and hit OK. So now we have 4 components, all connected in terms that they make up the room, but they're all individual entities, okay? Now, something else I told you guys about last week is if you wanted to take that wall and cut that component now and copy and paste it you can end up with two of these, whatever you wanted. So if I was to say say I would say copy and paste, I now have another one. This is now a matching component. They're the exact same, okay? And if we went over to our little organization over here, if I remember correctly, I'm gonna find our components, which is here, okay? And I'm gonna go to our home, which is our model, and you'll see somewhere in here is east wall, okay? And these are all the ones that are in this whole drawing, by the way. And we'll see west wall. These are all in here, okay? So I could click on that, I could come over and I could click and I have another one, okay? Now, I wanna make sure you guys understand, this whole presentation I'm doing is considered one drawing. I could draw anywhere infinitely on here and it would be called one drawing. As long as I'm putting something in this space and making it a component, it'll go over here. So everything that's made up this entire drawing is in here, okay? Just so you guys understand. So I'm going to go back to where we were, which is right here. So we now have our components. Now look what happens. If I bring us in here, okay, I'm going to actually take this. Now, what's interesting is I extruded this already, so I'm going to delete that. Okay, now look what's happened. I've put this up way high, which is a mistake. So I'm just going to very quickly correct that. Because what I did is I built the components on top of the extruded drawing. So they became separate entities. I'm just going to move that really quickly. I'm going to move it right back down. See if it will let me. I'm going to bring it over here. There we go. And this is a little, see, remember I said last time that if you get off your axis, it can be a little cumbersome to get it back, right? So I'm trying to figure out how to get this back to my axes. I want to get it back to this point right there. So now we're flat with everything. You guys don't need to understand what I just did. It was way more complicated than it needed to be. I made a small error there. But what I did, just so you know, is I extruded as an example those walls, and then I didn't flatten it back down again when I drew my components. So my components were drawn at the top at 98 inches or 96 inches, not at the bottom. So I just had to move that back to its location. So here we go. We now have our four walls on the same plane at our origin. I can select one of these. Now I can't do anything with it. It won't allow me to push-pull it. Like, see how it shows up because it's a component. But I can edit that component now. I can edit just this one thing. I'm going to right-click and I'm going to say, instead of saying make component, it says edit component. Now if I grab my push-pull tool, which is over here, push-pull, and it selects, now I can click it and I can move up. And I can say 98, I'm gonna actually say 96 inches. And there is one wall extruded. And I'm gonna do that with every one of these. Now here's something that's actually kind of neat. If I click on this one and I hit edit component, and I'm gonna grab my extrude tool, I can move this to be the exact same height as the other wall a number of ways. We can do it the way we said, which is pull it up and override that, type in 96, hit enter, and it's going to go to the top, okay? Which is one way of doing it. Beautifully, SketchUp remembers your last push-pull command. So it remembers that my last time I extruded was 96 inches. So if I select this again, and all I do is double-click here, it will move it 96 inches exactly. That's one way of doing it. Now, of course, if I was to move this down 3 inches and stop, now it remembers 3 inches. So if I double click on this one, it'll only move 3 inches. Because I moved this one in one foul swoop to 96, it remembered 96 inches. I just double clicked this one and it moved it 96 inches. Also notice that right now, this is still live. It is still a component that is in editing mode. So I can do anything to this. To make this go back to a component and not be live anymore, I just grab the select tool and I select anywhere off of this. And now it's back to being a component, okay? and I'm going to orbit, and I'll orbit around here. If you remember correctly, the orbit tool is in this section here, our moving tool. I get to orbit by basically hitting the O as a shortcut on my keyboard, and it allows me to move around my space. Okay, I'm going to zoom in one more time. I'm going to hit the select tool. I'm going to select that component. I'm going to right click and say edit. Now, this is the third way of doing this. We now know that I can grab my extrude tool. I can grab this thing. I can pull it and type in 96 and it'll go to the right height. I can double click it if my last command was 96 and it will take it to automatically 96. But there's one other way. As I click on this and I start to move it up, I can move across this thing. If I move to any plane that is parallel to or cross from or on the same axis as this, it'll snap to that. So if I go over here and boop, you see how it snaps? It goes to that height. I can even do it across the room. Boop, okay? Like my sound effects, there you go. It's gonna snap to, so if I go to that, any edge in this room, it'll, so that's really great if you're doing something where you're moving a lot of things at one time. You can just basically get one in the right location and move to that spot. Once you hit the mouse, it's finished editing. Now this is still editable, right? So I could accidentally be like, oh man, I didn't want to do that, okay? Then I'm just gonna go back and do my undo, okay? Right now it's still editable. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my select button, hit anywhere on there. And now we have our 4 walls just like before, but the beauty this time is we now can select any one of these, okay? So I could take this one and I could hide it. And now I can see into that room, right? I could take this one and I could hide it, okay? So there we go. That's how we can build our 4 walls. So what's next? Now, we need to put a door and a window. We go back over here, we have a door, and I believe we have a window, okay? So I didn't do the door in the drawing. You could, but I'm gonna actually just do the door straight into the room, okay? So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna orbit around, okay? Now remember, orbit allows you to basically go anywhere. I don't wanna make you guys sick, but, and then the hand tool allows you to pan. Orbit allows you to go around, pan, pan, okay? I'm gonna use the orbit tool. I wanna get inside this room, okay? Because all of my measurements for this room, okay, I'm gonna delete, I'm gonna get rid of these guidelines now because we don't need them. My measurements for this door were taken from inside the room, okay? Something else I want to show you. You may notice that this looks kind of weird. It's called parallel projection right now. It is not 3D perspective. I can change the way that looks pretty easily, okay? I can go over to display. Actually, no, where is it? Display. Right now I am on parallel projection. And that works when I'm looking down on something, right? Because it keeps everything from being in some sort of perspective. There's no shadows. But if I wanted this to look a little bit more lifelike now, I can switch that view to perspective. Now that looks a little bit more, see how it actually is foreshortening and folding into space? Okay, that is just a more realistic view. And I'm gonna stick in this view for a while because it just gives us a better sense of the real space. So I need to put a door in here. Now, of course, we know this is one whole component, right? So how am I gonna put a door in here? Well, the first thing is, why don't we start with some guidelines? Why don't we at least give us something that is a guideline for this space? So I'm gonna go to my trusty measure tool, my tape measure tool. Now I know that her door, because I measured it, starts at 4 inches off that wall, okay? So I'm gonna go randomly anywhere, hit 4, and there we go, right? There's a 4-inch now parallel guide next to that wall. And I also know that a door was 7 inches off of this side. So I'm gonna take my tool and I'm gonna snap to that wall. It snaps right to it. And again, as long as I move it on an axis, see the green axis? I'm not moving it in some weird way. And I go over here and I type in 7, I know that's where my door is. I also know my door is 84 inches tall. So I'm going to snap to the floor, snap to the bottom here. I'm going to select that, click on it, and I'm going to move up. So then look, I'm moving in the blue axis. So I know that's where I want to be. And I'm going to stop short. I'm going to make sure that I did that right because my keyboard moved. And I'm going to hit 84. And that is where my door is going to go, right? Now, how do I put a door in here? We can do it one of two ways. If we want just a door that is closed on this face, I can take my rectangle, my line tool, and I can basically go to these intersections and I can draw a door, okay? Now, if I select this, that selects the component. This is its own space, okay? You see how it's its own thing. It's not connected to this because I did not edit this component. This is its own free space right here, right? I can grab that and do whatever I want with it. I can move it forward, right? I can move it up. It's its own entity, okay? But that doesn't give me a hole here. There's no hole there. So how do I do that? So let me delete that. I noticed that that guide seems to be off. Maybe I'm just using my mind here, but okay. How do I edit this and put a hole in here? Well, I essentially do the exact same thing I just did, but I'm actually going to do it on the component. I'm actually going to do it I'm going to edit this component. So it actually becomes part of this. So again, I'm going to just click on that component. I'm going to hit right click. I'm going to put edit component. Now this is live, right? Now I can select faces. There's a live thing, but my guides are still there, which is beautiful, right? Just because I'm editing this, the guides that I put in place still exist, okay? So same thing, I'm gonna take the pencil tool and I'm gonna connect to my little intersections here. Now here's the neat thing, because I'm doing this in the component, I don't have to put this line in because that line's already there. I'm using the line from the component. And I'm gonna come up to here and down. And what should happen when I click here? We should see that becomes its own entity that's still connected to this component, right? So now if I was to do anything with this, I can, again, same as before, I can pull this, but I could also push it in, okay? If I push it in, I basically am eliminating that space. Now, what you can't see, I'm just grabbing this with my mouse and I'm moving it, clicking on it one time and moving it. It's going to want to snap to its standard places. We know that wall is 4 inches deep. So essentially, if I was to push this back 4 inches, right, hit 4 inches, there's going to be nothing there at the end. Let me do that again. Go back, 4, boom. It's gone. It disappears. Because I went to the point where there was nothing there anymore. It was exactly 4 inches. There was no space. You can do that as well by just grabbing it. And as you pull back, it's going to want to snap to that back wall. You see how it goes a weird sort of phase. I just click it and it's gone. Now I take my select tool, unselect, and now I've punched a hole through this wall. Okay. I can do the same with this window, but I want to see it from the inside. So I'm going to zoom around. I'm going to look inside this thing, okay? Same thing, I'm going to do my guides. I know this is 6 inches off of the wall. I know this is 6 inches off of the wall. Do that again just to make sure. 6 inches. I know it's 36 inches off the ground. And I know the window size itself is 40 inches, but I also know how far down to come as well. So you can do it one way or the other. You can say, I need to come down 10 inches, right? Or you can say my window opening is 40 inches, okay? And there's where we want to draw our window. But we don't want to just draw the window in right now because the same thing is going to happen. It's not going to be connected. I want to punch a hole through this. So I have to edit this component. So I'm going to right click, edit component. We could use the pencil tool. I'm going to do one other tool here to show you something differently. I'm going to actually take the shape tool because essentially when we're drawing this with a pencil, we're just creating a rectangle. That's all we're doing. So I'm going to actually just make it real easy and grab the rectangle tool. Now the rectangle tool, you'll see it's floating right out here on the blue plane. Now it's on the red. Now it's on the green. We want to be on the red, right? I'm going to go up and I'm going to find that intersection. See how it snaps? It snaps and it should snap to the intersection right there. I'm going to click one time. Now I'm going to drag to the other opposite corner. It's going to snap. It's going to snap and it should snap right there. And I'm going to click again. Now we have broken up that wall into 2 spaces. I'm going to use my push-pull tool. I'm not going to put it out this way. I'm actually going to push it back in again. I'm going to go 4 inches, and there it's gone. I'm going to take my select tool, select. Now this is back to a component. Now we can actually walk around, and we've got our walls and stuff in there. Okay, so a couple of more quick things. How do we put a ceiling? How do we put floor on this? The easiest way to do it is to basically take a pencil tool and draw this perimeter with the pencil tool. It's very simple, very quick to do because it's going to snap, but we're not going to actually connect it or bond it or meld it to these. We're just going to let it float as its own entity. We'll make that a component as well, right? So basically, I'm just going to take my pencil tool and I'm going to start at an intersection. I don't want it on the inside. I want it on the outside because it's going to cover the whole ceiling. Okay, I'm going to start where they connect, and I'm just going to pull it. You see it's going on the green, and it snaps to that corner, and it snaps to that corner, and so forth. I'm just going to take that all the way around. Okay, I'm going to zoom in here, whoop, right there, snap, snap. So this is very simple once you have something to outline. Now, what's going to happen when I connect here? There we go. We now have a space. Now, again, this is paper thin. It isn't even thin. It doesn't really exist. It's just a plane right now. So we want to make that into a bit of a space. We want to make it into a shape, into a form. So I'm going to take my push-pull tool. I'm just going to lift this whole ceiling up. Now, you can go as high as you want. I'm just going to go 1 inch. Okay? Now we have a ceiling, but it's not a component yet, right? It's just a bunch of different pieces all made up. I'm going to triple click on this whole thing here, and it selects everything. Okay? Now, I could just take and draw my mouse around it. As long as I don't grab the components and all of the components, I just grab the ceiling, it'll highlight the whole ceiling. If I grabbed a component, it would grab everything, right? I'm just trying to grab just the ceiling, every aspect of it. I want to get all, you'll look underneath, I've grabbed the bottom, I've grabbed all the sides. And what am I going to do here? Same thing. I'm going to make that a component, okay? And I'm going to call this ceiling, I'm actually going to call it ceiling 01 because we already have, or ceiling 02, we already have ceilings that I've built as components in here already, okay? And I'm just going to hit OK. And now that's a ceiling. And I'm going to do the same thing with the floor. I'm going to flip it over. Now, all of these guides are no longer needed. They're just kind of in the way. Oh, these guys are driving me crazy. How do I get rid of those guides? Okay. So to get rid of these guides, I'm going to get rid of all of my stuff here because it's all in the way. To get rid of all of these guides, I can go through and I can click on all of them and erase them. You could take the eraser tool and just start erasing them. I could click and hit delete, right? But there's still a ton. I'm going to go to views. Actually, sorry, not views. I'm going to go to display, and you'll see it says delete guides. I'm going to just delete all the guides in one go, and they're all gone. Okay, just a very simple way of getting rid of them. If I didn't want to get rid of them, if I actually wanted them still there, but they were just distracting me, I can go back there and I can actually say, and unselect the guides. They're still there, they're just hidden, okay? But I don't need the guides anymore. I'm just gonna delete them. I don't need to see them anymore, okay? So same thing, I'm gonna take my pencil, I'm gonna start here, and I'm gonna start just tracing around, okay? Now, I'm gonna go over a gap here, right? I'm gonna go over a little space, but that's okay. As long as I follow to this corner, it'll draw that across, no problem. Notice that it's staying in the correct planes. Okay, I'm going to the outside edges. all the way around. And what's going to happen here? Same thing. Now I can click on that and it's connected the whole thing together. I'm going to take my push pull tool. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to bring it down. I'm going to say 1 inch, hit enter. I'm going to click on that and select it all, right? Or I'm going to just drag around it and select it all. That did not play nice. I'm going to triple click to select it. And I'm going to say make component. And I'm going to call this floor 02 and hit OK. So now we have a floor, 4 walls, and a ceiling that we can individually hide, edit. We can do whatever we want to them without affecting the whole model. That gives us a whole bunch of choices now. It also allows us to make duplicates of this house. So say, for example, I'm going to hide this real quickly. Remember, if there was another room that had the exact same wall, I can actually take a copy of that and I can place it in, put it anywhere in my model, right? And now I have the exact same component. Now what's beautiful is because these are components, they're the exact same, they're duplicates of each other. What you do to one does to the other. So say you build your whole house, you have all these duplicate parts in there, or you have the exact same room 5 or 6 different times, and you say, oh man, I did my heights at 96, they should be at 98. You don't have to go back and change every single one. You just have to change one. If I go here and I edit that component, you'll notice as I move this up to 98, the other one moves with it. Okay, that again is a beauty of components, right? Once you have a bunch of stuff built out of the same entity, you only have to edit one, it edits them all universally. Okay, so we've covered a lot real quickly. Now, what we didn't get to is we didn't get to how I got this furniture, okay? And I did not build all this furniture. I'm going to tell you the trick to this furniture. I know there are hundreds of thousands of people that have built so many cool things, and then they upload them for free to the SketchUp warehouse. And you can just grab them at will. You can scale them, you can edit them. They come in as components. So they come in just like your walls, okay? They are fixed, they are frozen, they are protected. But then all you have to do is hit the edit component. You can do anything you want to them. So for example, let me go over to this panel. You'll see it says right here, it says 3D warehouse. I'm going to open up my 3D warehouse and I'm going to search for, look at that. It's a beautiful model right there. We can grab that if we want. You want to put a car in your room, we can just go ahead and do that. But I'm just going to put a search for a bed. Okay, and I'm just going to hit return. And anybody who's uploaded a bed for free is in here. Okay, and I'm going to select this one because I think that's the one I used. And I'm going to click on that one. I'm going to say, yeah, you know what, that looks pretty good. It's not a huge file. And I'm going to hit download. Okay, now I can bring this bed into my model. Now, here's the one problem. The person who built this bed has done everything that I say not to do. They have not built this bed to any true scale, okay? It is massive. This bed is for a giant. This bed is bigger than the room. It's just huge, right? Let's do a quick measure on here and find out how big this person is. Just in width alone, that's a 192-inch wide bed. Now we're talking way bigger than a king, okay? So I'm like, oh man, I really like that bed, but it's way too big. It's not gonna fit in here. Believe it or not, that's the exact same bed. Well, it kind of was. Let me move that real quickly. That's the bed right there. So I just want to scale that down. So you can do this. You can eyeball it if you wanted to. You can go to the scale tool, which is, I believe, where is it? Right here. Okay. Under the move tool, you'll see there's move, there's rotate, and there's scale. Rotate just allows you to basically click and just rotate things, okay? Scale tool allows you to scale something. So I'm gonna click on this. You see all these little green dots show up, okay? I can do it, and if you click on one corner, it'll say uniform scale. It'll say individual scale. Like I can change its width, right? I'm gonna escape out of that because I don't wanna do that, right? Or I can just scale the whole thing down to a reasonable size, okay? Now, if you wanted that to be an exact size, you can use your guides to create guides around that original bed and snap to those guides when you scale this. Okay. For now, I'm just going to show you very quickly how I scaled that bed. And that bed can now be brought into your room. You can rotate it. You can get it on in your space. And that's how I got all these components. I basically just went to the 3D warehouse and I stole them. What did Picasso say? Great artists, good artists borrow, great artists steal. So I just took what was available. Okay. One last thing. I'm going to check my chat real quick, and then I'm going to get out of the sharing the screen. I can talk to you guys. You notice I have a wood color on my floor. Okay. I'm going to select my floor here. I can't put any color on here right now because it's a component. It is protected. I can't edit it. But if I want to put color on here, I can hit edit my component. It is now selectable, and I can choose the bucket tool. Okay. And that's paint. Okay. And that's going to allow me to paint this any way that I want. Now, if you go to the SketchUp that they provide, they give you all of these categories for painting. Now, you can just go to colors. I could just put like a bright red floor on here. Okay. And all I did is I'm going to go back. All I did is I took my bucket tool. I selected whatever color I wanted. Okay. And now my bucket tool is full of that color, and I bring it over to my space and I click and it makes it that color. Okay. But there's other things besides colors. There are, say we wanted a stone floor. Let's go with a cold marble floor. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to bring it over here, and well, that's going to be a little funeral home-ish. So we're not going to go there. Let's go wood. And they have limited choices, but I kind of like this light wood over here. So I'm going to select that one. I'm going to bring it over, and there's my wood floor. Okay. Now, you might ask yourself, well, what if I want the planks to go the other way? There are a ton of different ways of editing this. I don't have to move the whole floor. I can move just the texture. Okay. It's very possible to do that. But these are things that you can actually start looking up on Google yourself and finding out how to do that. But essentially, we now know how to build a space using some of the basic tools on a little bit more of an advanced way to make a room. And we made that room in what, 45 minutes or so. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quickly so I can actually see you guys. Is everybody still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, Sue. Did I lose John? Oh, John is still there. Thank you.
No, John's there.
Wonderful. Well, listen, there's just 3 of you. So that was a lot to absorb, but hopefully kind of gave you some understanding as to how intuitive and how quickly you can kind of move around. Obviously, once you start playing with the tool yourself, it'll connect real quickly. And as I said last time, there are just fantastic avenues on Google and on SketchUp's page that will really help you walk through some of these things. Anytime I find myself in trouble, I literally just go to Google and type in how to arrange 7 objects in an array in SketchUp, and you'll get 10 different people showing you how to do it. But is there anything that you guys would like to ask right now? While I know we're a little over time, but I'm happy to show you guys anything that you want to see, or anything particular you want to see, or anything that you want to ask about SketchUp.
So I have a question. We made the door opening. We made the window opening. If I were in warehouse, would I be able to find a door? Or
so there's 100%. You could, if you typed in door in warehouse, you'll find 1,000 doors. Okay. But you could easily build it as well. Let me go back to I'm going to do this real quickly. I'm going to go back to my model. You know how we punched that door out, right? And the way we punched it out is we actually created that shape by editing the component. So we could actually punch a hole through it. Remember how I said, well, if we didn't edit the component and we just put the shape on the component, didn't make it part of it, it now becomes its own entity. That's kind of how I'd want to do a door, right? I wouldn't want the door to be part of this component. I would love the door to be a separate component. And we can do that the same way. We now, instead of doing the guides, right, we now have established snapping areas because we basically built this hole, right? So I could actually go into my rectangle tool, right? And it's going to snap. See how it snaps and I can bring this down to this corner and it snaps. And now I literally have a door, right? If I wanted to pull this a little bit, let's say my door is 1.25 inches thick, okay? That's my door. I can triple click on that. It's not selecting anything else. And I could actually call that, door 1, hit OK. Now that's a separate door. I can do anything I want to that. I can edit it. I can move it. Moving allows me to actually move it flush into the space, okay? I can hide it and suddenly the door's not there, okay? Now I can edit this door too. If I said I wanted, remember the offset tool? I'm just do this real quickly. That offset tool is wonderful for so many things. Say I'm like, oh, this door has a little bit of detail to it. I'm gonna say edit this component and I wanna play with just this door, right? I can't, I'm just playing with this one. And I go back to that offset tool I showed you guys at the very beginning. I hit offset. Now it selects that. I can actually bring this in and I can say, well, this door has a little bit of a recess in it, okay? Now I have a door in here, okay? That's simple, okay? Now, moving it, there's the move tool down here. If you select the move tool, whatever you touch, okay, whatever I select, I'm gonna select nothing right now. I'm gonna get the move tool. Whatever I'm touching is what is allowed to move, right? So if I'm floating over this thing, what I wanna do is I wanna grab a corner, okay, and I wanna click on it and I wanna move in a plane, right? So if I move, you notice I'm moving in the red plane, right? And it's gonna wanna snap. It's gonna wanna snap on the plane that you chose. I chose the front plane. I'm actually holding onto this front edge. If I chose the back edge and clicked on it, that's gonna snap. See the difference, okay? I'm gonna unclick, I'm gonna move, I'm gonna click the front and bring it out. Okay, if I click the front and I push it back, that's gonna be my snapping point. So it's gonna wanna snap in flush with the door. Okay, did that help answer your question a little bit?
Yes, thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah, and then you could build trim on here. Typically speaking, is one of the things that I really are particular about is make things as components. It'll save you a bunch of headaches down the road. Because if you get out of the habit of doing that, all of a sudden you want to edit something, but it's kind of melded to or bonded to the whole model. Now it gets really tricky because every time you make a change, you could be messing with the overall geometry, right? You could be sort of breaking some of those really key aspects. And it just gets complicated where if you can just isolate something like the trim, I would do, if I was gonna put baseboard in here, for example, I'd make that all one component. And then I can literally play with the baseboard to my heart's content and not have to worry about it messing up the whole model. And if I do screw up the baseboard, so I lose the baseboard, right? I don't lose the rest of the model. I can just delete the baseboard and start again. It's just a really good way. So each time you keep adding components like window trim or chair railing or whatever, make them components, make them their own entities. Okay.
So I have one more question. If I make baseboard, I make it a component and I bring it into another room and I want to use it kind of as a starting, but maybe I want it to be a 1/2 inch shorter. Can I then duplicate that component, rename it in some way, like make a new component?
That's another great question, Sue. Let me show you. That, and I nearly brought that up, and I chose not to, just because.
Sorry.
But you know how I said I'm just gonna do it not with baseboard. I'm just gonna do it with the component that we already have, right? So basically, you're essentially saying, say I like that door, and I want to use that door again, right? So I'm going to basically just copy and paste this door somewhere. And I want to put that in a separate room. Say I've designed it the way I like. And I'm like, oh yeah, but this room, the door's smaller. And we now know if we edit this door, right? If I'm going to edit this door and pull it, right? We know sadly, I've now edited, I'm going to move here just so you can see, I've now made that door smaller too. And that's what you're saying with the baseboard, right? If you built baseboard in here and you wanted to basically use that same profile and edit it somewhere else, you don't want it to change it here. Right. So there is a way of doing that. Let me go back and I'm going to stop what I'm doing here. So this basically is a component. I can edit that component. But you see this little thing down here says make unique. If I click on make unique, it's still a component, but now it's named differently to this component. So this will be like door O1, and this will be like door O1B. I'm not sure what their naming conventions are, but basically I could make hundreds of these, and they're all
Perfect.
separate components, but but they're not attached to the original anymore. If I looked at my component list, we probably had a C. Where is so? Oh, there you go. Right. So there's door
Yes.
one, which is the one I made, and there's the door one, number one, which is this one. So they are
Great.
components, but they're separated.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, guys. Well, look, I hope this was helpful. It's a little daunting to try and cover so much in 2 hours, basically. I hope I didn't overwhelm you. I hope I didn't give you too little. I'm toying with the idea of doing maybe an open session for anybody that just wants to ask questions. But feel free to shoot me an email if that is intriguing to you. But also, you guys are a small group. If you start drawing and you have any questions, feel free to email me. You have my email address. I'm happy to answer questions in SketchUp. I love using SketchUp. I think it's a great tool. So don't be shy. If you just find yourself in trouble or you don't know how to do something, I'm happy to help out.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
You do the same, guys. Thank you so much for being here, and look forward to next time.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. You all good, John?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you, guys. Take care.
You too.